Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. It is the first day of school back from winter break, and so I wanted to give this a shot where I read to you the read aloud book that I'm going to be reading to my students. Last time, the only other time that I've done this, I'll link it up here, I did it during read aloud time, and that's an option. You do whatever you're gonna do, but I would like to read it here with you, and then that way I can have just, teach, not worry about this. But we are gonna be reading Just Because by Matthew McConaughey. Interesting. Okay. It is that Matthew McConaughey. So, being the first day back, I wanted to remind my students that just because we don't always agree doesn't mean that we can't be friends. And just because we argue sometimes doesn't mean that they're, wrong. And just because different things, I really want to focus on social emotional learning, especially the first couple days back. We're gonna get back into routines, do read alouds, and just kind of remember what it means to be a student, and kind of go over the rules and everything that we need to remember. So this is just a little social emotional learning moment. I hope you enjoy it. Just Because by Matthew McConaughey. Just because they threw the dart doesn't mean that it stuck. Just because I've got skills doesn't mean there's no luck. This is the part where I would probably pause and show them the pictures of, the art and the sports. How, yes, you have to practice and have skills, but there's also luck involved. Just because they let you down doesn't mean you gotta get low. Just because they're clumsy doesn't mean they have no flow. Just because you answer doesn't mean you heed the call. Just because I'm at the top doesn't mean I cannot fall. Just because I let go doesn't mean that I stopped climbing. Just because I mean it doesn't mean that I'm not lying. Just because I'm finished doesn't mean that I'm done. Just because you get the gold doesn't mean that you won. Just because you wrote it doesn't mean that I read it. Just because I did it again doesn't mean I don't regret it. Just because you can pull it off doesn't mean you should do it. Just because you failed doesn't mean that you blew it. Just because they say it's so doesn't mean it happened to me. There's how I see it. How you see it. And what will come to be. Okay, so they're planning their tree house. This is how he wants it, this is how she wants it, and that's how it ultimately became. What it ultimately became. Just because you threw shade doesn't mean I'm out of the sun. Just because they shut me down doesn't mean I have not won. Just because you're wailing doesn't mean that you're a crier. Just because I lied doesn't mean that I'm a liar. Just because they can choose doesn't mean you have a choice. Just because they don't hear you doesn't mean you have no voice. Just because it's silent doesn't mean that it's not loud. Just because you're alone doesn't mean there's not a crowd. That is the worst kind of loneliness too, is being surrounded by people but still feeling lonely. I don't know if you've ever experienced something like that, but if you have, then just know that people are here for you, that I'm here for you. Just because I'm dirty doesn't mean I can't get clean. Just because you're nice doesn't mean you can't get mean. Just because I'm going in circles doesn't mean that I'm dizzy. Just because I'm sitting still doesn't mean that I'm not busy. Just because we're friends doesn't mean that you can't burn me. Just because I'm stubborn doesn't mean that you can't turn me. Just because I forgive you doesn't mean that I still trust. There's what you do. There's what I do. And you know, it's okay to not be able to forgive right away if you and a friend have a problem and, you know, they are ready to apologize. You don't have to accept that apology right then. You can take your time. And if you do forgive them, then your relationship, your friendship might be different. And that's okay too. You just have to learn to kind of move on and go with the flow of life, because it's always changing. And yours is not my must. Just because it's fiction doesn't mean it can't be true. See how she dreamed of being in outer space and then she became an astronaut? So it did eventually become true. Not right away, but eventually. Just because you want one more doesn't mean that you need two. Just because you're a bully doesn't mean that you're strong. Just because it felt right then doesn't mean it won't feel wrong. Just because a hand is clutched doesn't mean that it's a fist. Just because I'd rather not doesn't mean I don't take risks. Just because I'm in the race doesn't mean I'm fully ready. Just because you're shaking doesn't mean that you're not steady. And I think that that's something that we don't really always think about. Like, I know I don't give myself enough credit. When credit is due, I just say, hey, that was scary, or I'm scared to do that, so it didn't mean enough to me, or it didn't mean anything to me. But I think we need to think about things differently, because if you're nervous about something or scared, then part of you cares enough to be nervous or to be scared. And that is just amazing. All right, we're almost there. Just because you follow doesn't mean you're not a leader. Just because I keep winning doesn't mean that I'm a cheater. Just because we disagree doesn't mean that you're not right. And just because it's dark doesn't mean that it's night. Just because the sun has set doesn't mean it will not rise. Because every day is a gift, each one a new surprise. And I'm pretty sure that that is the end. Yes. It says, to my kids, your kids, and the kid in all of us, we're all as young as we're gonna be, so let's just keep learning. McConaughey. So, the end. I hope you enjoyed this story with me. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to my channel if you are new around here. And I will catch you in the next video. Bye.